For the first time in many years, the 2022 Fuchs Lubricants British Historic Rally Championship would see a non-escort fighting for the title. Matt Edwards joining us at the second round in that glorious Fiat 131. The cars may have looked different, but the battles were as close and as exciting as ever, with the title going down to the wire at the final round. But before we go any further into that, let's look back at the first of the action, way back in February, at the first round of the season, the Raponian Rally in Yorkshire. So as we headed out into the stages for the first time this season, it would be the early lead for Matthew Robinson and Sam Collis. Home advantage playing into their favour, of course, but it was clear they had no intentions of hanging around from the start, here to make their mark once again. Fastest times putting them 22 seconds clear at the front of the field by the end of the morning stages. Nick Elliott and Dave Price would find a little more grip than they were expecting in these stages. Perhaps with the reverse seeding, the earlier cars had taken the top layer of mud off the road. In any case, things were going well, although they did feel that they were a little untidy in places. They'd need to get that sorted out to get on terms with that escort overhead. Our reigning BHRC champions Ben Friend and Cliffy Simmons came back out to defend their title this season. They had a little issue with the intercom on stage 2, but aside from that, things were going to plan. Third overall at the midpoint of the rally. After a recent big disappointment on the Roger Albert Clark Rally, Roger Chilman was keen to settle into a safe pace on the opening round of the BHRC, especially in that new car and with a new co-driver in Gwynford Jones. They were getting to grips with everything a little more as the morning went on, and they lie in 4th place for now. Meanwhile, it would end up being a fantastic start for Peter Bennett and Simon Jones. Only their second ever gravel event, and the first time in a rear-wheel drive car. So, to be lying in 5th place after the morning stages was something to be writing home about, and certainly not something that everybody expected. One of the first casualties of the morning, and indeed the season, would be Joe Price and Chris Brooks. They'd retire in stage 3. A misfire would be present in the second stage of the morning. It wasn't a great start. Category 2 would see a host of returning and new faces out competing at the first round of the season. And it would be Warren Philliskirk and Gary Green who would lead the way after the morning stages. A bit of a wake-up call for the pair, who were no strangers to this opening stage of the rally, but usually in 3 shorter sections, this time being joined by some closed-road tarmac link roads to make one long and pretty challenging stage. Second in the category will be Ben and Stephen Smith. They also took an early lead in the C3 class as well. The times were close, and they'd have to watch out behind as well. Chasing them down would be Jeremy Eason and Mike Reynolds in that Datsun. They were only 4 seconds back from Smith as well after 3 stages. Closely matched this weekend, looking like we had a good fight on our hands. And not in category 2, but in category 1 by themselves would be Bob Bean and Mike Curry. The pair going well overall, even if it looked like Bob had forgotten to close his door properly on that Lotus Cortina for the opening stage of the rally. Onto the afternoon stages of the opening round of the season then, and there'd be a big change, not only on the leaderboard, but in terms of the weather as well. Some parts of the stages getting a good covering of snow, making the conditions tricky. Thankfully for Bob Bean and Mike Curry, it would be a finish, and that's what they came here to do. They, of course, take the Cat 1 honours with that, but a good finish overall as far as the timesheets were concerned. There'd be frustration, though, for our morning's Category 2 leaders, Warren Philliskirk and Gary Green. They'd lost reverse gear. That, of course, wasn't needed if they wanted to go fast, but they did have to back off a little to avoid any overshoots or problems that could have seen them needing to reverse the car. Otherwise, it could have been game over. So 3rd place would be a strong yet sensible finish for the pair this weekend. That change for our morning leaders would, of course, see change in the podium places, with Jeremy Eason and Mike Reynolds more than happy to step up and take 2nd place at the end of the first rally of the season in that Datsun. And that would mean it's victory for Ben and Stephen Smith. The top 2 places decided by 8 seconds. And if that was how things were going to pan out for the rest of the season, it wasn't going to be an easy job for anyone to pick a winner from our crews. Back to Category 3 though, and it would be bad news for Peter Bennett and Simon Jones. After that strong start, they go off the road on stage 5, losing around 8 minutes in the process. They did get the car back out and got to the finish, but any chance of a fantastic debut result had gone. Bit of misfortune as well for Ben Friend and Cliffy Simmons. They were unable to keep hold of their third place that they'd held in the morning, dropping down the leaderboard to end the rally 5th overall and in the class. A few little moments along the way. Didn't lose them loads of time, but these things all add up. It was, though, a great end to the first round of the series for Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie. They managed to keep out of any trouble, mostly, that is, to take 4th place overall at the first round, just beating reigning champion Friend to that position by 6 seconds. Roger Chilman and Gwynford Jones made a few little changes going into the afternoon stages, getting that new car how they wanted. It seemed to work well for them. They'd be happy enough with that solid 3rd place finish with a long season ahead. A steady pace, meanwhile, was the aim for the last few stages for Nick Elliott and Dave Price. They'd been unlikely to catch our rally leaders, and they had a bit of time in hand to Chilman behind them. They made it to the finish with 2nd place and some good points to start off that championship campaign. But taking victory at this first round will be Matthew Robinson and Sam Collis. They've been dominant all day long, no issues for the pair. They end the rally with a 47-second advantage, taking maximum points from this opening round. Round 2 of the Fuchs Lubricants British Historic Rally Championship took our crews to Wales for the Rally North Wales, and as well as our familiar faces from the first round, we also welcomed some new and returning faces to the series for the first time this season. We saw the lead changing hands throughout the morning, but it was Nick Elliott and Dave Robson coming out of the morning loop with that lead. 7 seconds of an advantage to be exact in that place as well. They weren't exactly happy with the pace in places. A bit ominous for those around them, of course, but the times were telling a different story. Elliott had been changing places, though, with this man, Matt Edwards, with Hamish Campbell alongside, the multiple British rally champion out in the Fiat 131 and looking to mix things up. Damage to the front wheel in the 3rd stage of the morning, hampering progress a little. But Edwards still managed to get back to service with 2nd place overall and still within grasp of that victory. Roger Chilman with Patrick Walsh alongside this time came to Wales off the back of that 3rd place finish at the opening round, and he'd be more than happy with the same again here in such a competitive field. But that didn't mean that this pair weren't going to try for a place or 2 higher. Things went well, enjoying those stages and keeping things tidy throughout the morning to lie in 3rd place. With reports coming in of the stages being rough in some sections, it would be no surprise to see some big names on our retirements list so early on. One of those being our round 1 winners, Matthew Robinson and Sam Collis. They bent the prop shaft in one of the morning stages, the damage too bad to continue for the rest of the rally. We'd also lose Ben Friend and Cliffy Simmons, the reigning champions, picking up a double puncture in the 1st stage of the day, losing them some valuable time, and then the wear on the tyres in the following stages meaning that they didn't have a decent set of tyres for the final stage in the loop. They'd be forced to retire the car as it simply wasn't safe to push on in the final stage without the grip. Henry Grehan and Dan Petrie were another crew to end up with a puncture in the morning stages, but thankfully it hadn't fully deflated before the end of the stage. They still put in some good times as well, ending the morning 4th overall. Robert Goff and Jack Bowen had a good feeling in the car at this 2nd round. The conditions and the dust were the same for everyone, of course, so they just did what they needed to do. clambering their way through the field and ending the morning with 5th. Category 2 would see some more names being added to this already competitive entry for this year's series. And fastest of those over the morning stages would be this man, Adam Milner, Roy Jarvis alongside standout performers on the recent Roger Albert Clark Rally. And they were expected to bring some of that pace to the BHRC as well. They do make a wrong tyre choice in the morning, opting for a soft tyre that was just wearing too quickly. But despite this, they held a good lead in the category. Chris Gill and Brian Hodgson were another pair mixing up the leaderboard here at round 2. They were struggling to get into a rhythm in places, but their worries were probably unfounded. They end the morning with a surprising 2nd place. Category winners from last time out, Ben and Stephen Smith, were going well here at the 2nd round. They weren't in the lead overall where they wanted to be, but they would be leading the C3 class from that 3rd place on the leaderboard and only 4 seconds back from Skill, crucially. Bob Bean and Mike Curry would once again find themselves the only ones entered in Category 1, but that wasn't stopping them pushing hard and enjoying the stages in that Cortina in pursuit, perhaps, of a decent overall finish as well. As we went into the afternoon stages, there wasn't much change for Bob Bean and Mike Curry. They got to the finish and took some good class points to add to their season tally as well. A 2nd Category 2 win of the season wasn't to be though for Ben and Stephen Smith. But they wouldn't be complaining too much. A puncture in stage 5 hadn't helped their fight for the lead, but they were also in amongst some fantastic and very fast crews fighting at the top of this category now. For Chris Gill and Brian Hodgson, it would be 2nd place. They'd backed off a little because of the conditions, but it would be enough to keep them in that hunt, and indeed in 2nd place, taking the C5 class victory with that as well. But that, of course, meant that it was the Category 2 win for Adam Milner and Roy Jarvis. They'd have enough problems of their own, to be honest. A puncture in stage 5 caused them some questionable shaky brakes for the rest of the afternoon. But clearly, with pace like this, they weren't on the brakes enough to even worry about it. Back to Category 3 now, and Rudy Lancaster with Guy Weaver along board climbed their way up the leaderboard overall, leading the way in the G2 class and now up to 5th place in the category. They did find the rough sections difficult, it was fair to say, but they'd managed things to get to the finish. Henry Grean and Dan Petrie, meanwhile, would go into the final stages in a battle for those podium positions. And things were close as well. They just missed out on that 3rd place by 5 seconds. A strong end to the 2nd round for the pair. Another good haul of points for the championship and plenty of promise for future rounds. But that would mean it was a repeat of that round 1 result for Roger Chilman and Patrick Walsh. They were happy enough with 3rd, a good end to a very competitive day on the Welsh stages. There was frustration though for Nick Elliott and Dave Robson. They'd suffer a puncture in stage 5 and they weren't the only ones, were they? That really wasn't going to help their fight for the win, and they decided that really at this point they just needed to get through with a reasonable pace and keep hold of that 2nd place, taking the points that came with it, especially in the absence of round 1 winner Matthew Robinson. But taking the victory at round 2, and indeed a 1st overall win for the Fiat, it would be Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell. They'd worked hard for the result, bending the steering in the afternoon stages as well, but they'd reached the end of the rally with a 16-second advantage to take those maximum points. Round 3 of the championship would see us stay in Wales and over to the Plains Rally. Brimming with confidence after victory last time out, it was a great start for Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell in the Fiat, the car unchanged from the previous round, which gave them the confidence to push right from the start, opening up a 21-second lead by the midpoint of the day. That lead, as ominous as it looked, hadn't actually been that way from the start though. Nick Elliott and Perida Davies came out in the second of the RSD Fiats and were pushing Matt through the first couple of stages. Sadly for them, it would be engine problems putting them out of the running after the second stage of the day, and indeed out of the rally. So that meant it was Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie who would reach the end of the morning in second place. Their job made a little easier with the loss of Elliott, of course, but they were on the pace and they weren't letting our leaders get too far into the distance. They were keeping an eye on everyone behind them as well. Speaking of which, it would be a reasonably straightforward run for Robert Goff and Jack Bowen over the morning stages. They'd get away with a knock to the rear wheel which damaged the rim but somehow didn't puncture the tyre, ending the morning with third overall. Hugh Hunter and Rob Fagg would be a little disappointed with their time through the second stage of the day, but apart from that, things had gone well and they were happy with the feeling in the car. They end the morning fourth overall, 11 seconds back from Goff up ahead. And this would be the first time sitting together for Sasha Cackard and Claire Williams. Out this weekend in the car usually driven by Roger Chilman, who wasn't at this round, and maybe some of the pace was rubbing off on them too. Fifth overall was a strong start, especially with limited rear-wheel drive experience under Sasha's belt. Category 2 would see, once again, our familiar faces back out to do battle once again, and just like last time out, it would be the lead in the category for Adam Milner and Roy Jarvis. They'd suffer with the throttle sticking open on the fourth stage of the day, meaning that they were coming into some of the junctions even faster than usual. Thankfully for them, they get through in one piece. Chris Skill and Brian Hodgson would have a big slide in the later stages of the morning, thankfully getting away with it and continuing to end the morning with second overall, first in the C5 class leaderboard. There would be some early attrition though. We saw a retirement from Ben and Stephen Smith, who'd been fighting at the top, especially in a good fight with Chris Skill, but it would all come to a premature end for the pair in the fifth stage. Warren Philliskirk and Gary Green were struggling to commit to the faster morning stages, but that seemed to be the same for many across the leaderboard. They made a good start to the rally though, third place in the category to show for their efforts so far. And once again, only the one runner in Category 1. The Lotus Cortina of Bob Bean and Mike Curry. Getting round in one piece so far, no doubt enjoying these great stages. We headed then into the afternoon stages at the third round of the BHRC, and there wouldn't be any change for Bob Bean and Mike Curry. Another good Category 1 score on the board at round 3, and showing their pace in that Cortina overall. In Category 2, it will be third for Warren Philliskirk and Gary Green. A little way back from that fight up ahead, but they'd held their own on that final step of the podium. There was practically nothing more that Chris Skill and Brian Hodgson could have done to catch our leaders at this stage. But all credit to them, they managed to keep them honest throughout the day, taking second place after a good charge with only 26 seconds the difference. But that means, you guessed it, it was a second win on the board for Adam Milner and Roy Jarvis. There seemed to be no stopping the pair, who pushed that 1600 Escort to its absolute limits on the stages, something that we'd seen from them just a few times recently. The times not only giving them the overall category victory, but it also ensured another top 10 finish in the BHRC overall. Back to Category 3, and a puncture towards the end of one of the stages. Didn't do much damage, surprisingly, to Paul Street and Ian Jones as far as their overall times were concerning. Although it may have been, they ended the rally 5th place overall, and they'd be more than happy with those points. Frustratingly though for Robert Goff and Jack Bowen, they missed out on the podium positions, being knocked out from third place into fourth on the final stage of the loop. It had been a close battle all day, and a slight moment in the final stage when the steering was knocked out of his hand was all it took, the car going offline. That might just have been the reason for this loss in position with things so close. But that did mean it was the final step on the podium for Hugh Hunter and Rob Fagg. They were getting used to the car more now, and most importantly, they were enjoying themselves on these stages. They'd be more than happy to be on the podium pace after only a handful of outings in rear-wheel drive. Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie had problems through the afternoon when they managed to crush the exhaust, meaning they were down on power. They did everything they could to keep hold of second place and managed it just by 2 seconds by the end of the rally. All of that meaning that it was win number 2 for Matt Edwards, Hamish Campbell and that Fiat 131. No major issues to report, the car and crew working well, a step closer to that fight for the title. So as we reached the midpoint of the season, it was advantage Grehan with an 8-point lead in the standings over Matt Edwards to take into the second half of the championship. Edwards, though, had 2 wins under his belt and enough fire in his belly and under the bonnet of that Fiat surely to take the fight and put the pressure on the Ludlow driver. The championship would take a break over summer, a chance to rest the cars and the crews, but we'd be back in action and in anger on the stages for the Woodpecker Stages rally up next. Home territory for Grehan. Would he be able to use that to his advantage and keep that lead at the top of the standings? Classic stages in the Hay Park and Radnor Complex awaited our crews. And with the last round being back in May, everyone was out looking forward to being back in the fight in the forests. Everyone knows the biggest home advantage of all is the home crowd, and cheering them on. It would be the lead at the midway point for Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie. 6 seconds the advantage in that position after 3 stages. Things hadn't been that way from the start though. Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell came out of the blocks ahead, but a few missed gears and a spin on the 3rd stage of the loop would put them on the back foot for the afternoon from 2nd place. Robert Goff and Sam Collis were struggling with the dust on the first of the day's stages. They dropped back a little in the running order to run with the faster cars on the following stages, which helped a little, although they didn't feel like the engine was pulling as much as it should be, so things looked like being a struggle for the rest of the day. Nick Elliott and Dave Price were another crew struggling with the feeling in the car, but they would be the first to admit it was probably due to being a little rusty themselves. It may have felt untidy, but it was still fast. 4th overall, just 3 seconds back from Goff. Tyres would prove an issue for many here at the 4th round, especially for Ben Friends and Cliffy Simmons. They were wearing them out in the first stage, but thankfully they had 2 spares to put on for the next pair of stages, ending the morning 5th overall, 4th in the D5 class behind the podium crews after a bit of damage limitation. Category 2 going into the second half of the season would see slightly smaller but no less competitive field out here on the Woodpecker Stages, and leading our crews after the morning loop would be Chris Gill and Brian Hodgson in the Escort. It would be a good lead as well. Over 2nd place, Rory and Paul McCann, the Avenger pair, a little off the lead, but in a good fight for the other podium positions as well as leading the way in the C2 class. Chasing them down in 3rd place would be Warren Philliskirk and Gary Green. Only 2 seconds between them and the Avenger up ahead at this stage, all to play for through the afternoon. Despite putting up a good fight, it was frustration to end the day for Warren Philliskirk and Gary Green. Their time in the podium positions was over through the afternoon, ending the day 4th overall. The times had been very close, but it's small consolation when you come away with 4th when you were hoping for that podium. And they missed out on the podium positions to Josh Carr and Richard Wardle by only 4 seconds. at the end of the rally. Josh also taking victory in the C3 class with that result. And talking of close, the Escort pair would miss out on second place by just a single second. Rory and Paul McCann getting ahead by just that 1 second to take the car through the finish and take victory. A close battle then for those podium positions by the end of the rally. Promise for the rest of the rounds this season. McCann also taking the C2 class victory in the process. But taking a comfortable win in the category this weekend will be Chris Gill and Brian Hodgson. The times were great, the pair taking that overall category win as well as the C5 class win as well. In Category 3, Will Onions and David Williams climbed a good way up the order to end the rally with 5th. Gaining a number of positions through the afternoon, they also take 4th in the D5 class as well. Ben Friend and Cliffy Simmons were finding that title defence tough this year. They'd still be wearing the rear tyres down to the canvas in the opening stage of the loop, but again, luckily, carrying 2 spares so that they could go into the Radnor complex on a fresh set. Despite the lack of rubber, they still managed 4th overall, with 3rd in the class. On to the podium positions then, and it would be 3rd place for Nick Elliott and Dave Price. They'd been fast, but not quite fast enough to keep up with the locals up ahead. The points for that 3rd place, though, would be crucial. Robert Goff, with Sam Collis alongside for this event, would have a much better afternoon, especially in terms of the dust. The pair keeping it going fast, flowing, and to the finish, ending up with 2nd overall and 2nd in the D5 class as well. So with only 1 place left to fill, and 2 names not mentioned yet, what happened to that fight at the top? Well, for Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell, they'd claw back enough time to go into the final stage of the event, dead level on times with Henry Greer. A last stage winner takes all battle. However, they wouldn't be so lucky with the Fiat not emerging from that final stage due to suspension problems. So that last-minute drama then, of course, meant that Henry Greer and Daniel Petrie were able to retain the lead of the event to the finish, taking 1st overall and in the class. A great end to the local event for the pair this weekend, maintaining that championship lead and enjoying those cheers from the home crowd. We'd reached then the penultimate round of the Fuchs Lubricants British Historic Rally Championship, and we'd be back in Yorkshire where it all began. But this time, it would start in darkness as the crews tackled the infamous Dolby stage on the Friday evening of the Trackrod Historic Cup. And it would be Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell leading the way with a staggering 22-second advantage through the night's only stage. Henry Greer and Daniel Petrie could only manage 2nd place. They were just glad to get to the end of the stage though, the map light not working, having to utilise the use of a torch, which was less than ideal in a fast stage like this one in the dark. Simon Webster and Alan Cook had picked up some of the scenery along the way through this evening's stage, but thankfully for them it was only through some adventurous lines and not any issues. They end the evening with 3rd place in the D5 class and overall. Ben Friend and Cliffy Simmons would be finding the conditions a little more slippery than they expected, but they were still managing things to end the day with 4th. A bit of a messy first stage with a spin and a stall would lose Nick Elliott and Dave Price some valuable time. Around 15 seconds they'd estimated. That, of course, putting them down the order and away from that fight at the top of the results, for now at least. Category 2 would see a quality entry taking on the Yorkshire stages. And it would be Chris Gill and Brian Hodgson taking that early lead after the opening night, even with an overshoot and a stall. And that lead will be over Josh Carr and Richard Wardle. 14.8 seconds back from Skill and leading the way in the C3 class as well. The fight was frustratingly missing Adam Milner, who didn't make it as far as our cameras on the opening stage before the engine blew on the Escort. For Warren Philliskirk and Gary Green, though, it would be 3rd place. they'd taken a bit of a cautious approach to the dark to make sure they got through the night in one piece. Although these were Philiskirk's home stages, they could even catch him out. Category 1 had seen Bob Bean competing against himself, the clock and the overall leaderboard on a number of rounds. But this weekend, we had a few more crews back out to challenge for that category win. And taking the early lead will be Terry Cree and Richard Shawes in the Mini Cooper S. For our regular Cortina crew of Bob Bean and Mike Curry, who, let's face it, is more used to imps, it will be second place for now and only half a second back from the lead after the opening stage through Dolby in the dark. And rounding out the trio of Cat 1 crews will be Bob Seeger and Peter Littlefield in the MG Midget. Only a small category entry and with two very small cars, but the most varied we'd had all year, and for that, we were celebrating. Heading into day 2, there wouldn't be any change at the top of the leaderboard. Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell still managing and indeed increasing that lead. They didn't feel like they'd made the best tyre choice on the opening stage of the day, but it had certainly gone well for the pair looking at the times. They now had a comfortable lead. All they had to do was stay out of trouble. There'd be change in the other places, though. Second place now occupied by Ben Friend and Cliffy Simmons, who were on a bit of a charge. A mix of speed and also taking some positions due to others' issues, putting them in prime position should anything happen to that Fiat 131 up ahead. Simon Webster and Alan Cook were going well overall, but they had a few little self-inflicted problems, not least an overshoot and a stall in the first stage of the day to contend with. They were still lying in third place, though, overall and in the class. And things were heading the right way for Richard Jordan and James Grattan-Smith, staying out of trouble to end the morning fourth overall. We would, though, lose Nick Elliott and Dave Price. They retire midway through the third stage of the morning, developing an electrical problem on the Fiat and having to pull over to the side of the stage. There'd be trouble brewing as well for our championship leaders, Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie. They overshoot a corner, ending up stuck in a ditch. No real damage to the car, but the damage had been done on the leaderboard. They were now in fifth place overall. In Category 2, there'd been no change at the top of the leaderboard. Chris Gill and Brian Hodgson still leading the way and managing that lead, although that hadn't always been the case, going off the road in the Gale Riggs stage into a ditch. Lucky to get away without any damage and continue with minimal time lost. For Josh Carr and Richard Wardle, it would still be second place. They were enjoying these local stages, Josh living just 10 minutes down the road, still leading the way in Class 3 as well. A bit of a rain shower had added a bit of drama here in Yorkshire through the morning, but thankfully for Warren Philiskirk and Gary Green, there'd be no issues getting through in one piece. They hold on to third place overall as well, only 6 seconds back from Carr up ahead at this stage. In Category 1, though, there'd be no stopping Bob Bean and Mike Curry. They start to show their class against a varied field for once, pulling away from the others in the class, taking 50 seconds of a lead by the end of the morning stages. It was second place then for the mini pair, Terry Cree and Richard Shawes, still leading the way in the B2 class, though. And second in that class, with no change to the overall times, will be Bob Seeger and Peter Littlefield in that midget. How good to hear a battle of the A-Series engines back out on the stages here in Yorkshire. On to the final loop of stages then, and there'd be no change. In Category 1, Bob Seeger and Peter Littlefield ending the rally with that third place. But they were clearly still pushing hard and enjoying themselves through every mile to the finish line. For Terry Cree and Richard Shawes, it would be second. They kept up with our rally leaders, but wouldn't be able to take back that lead this time out in the Mini. Which meant that it was another victory, but by far the best and most well-deserved one this season for Bob Bean and Mike Curry. Not for once competing against the clock and themselves. They take the win in good fashion, with a good fight out on the stages in that infamous Cortina. We wouldn't see any change in Category 2. Warren Philiskirk and Gary Green finishing the rally, third place overall, second in C5. Josh Carr and Richard Wardle unable to gain anything on the leaders through the last few stages, but they do hold off and extend any charge from behind that advantage back to third, ending the rally with a C3 class victory with second place overall. But that meant it was Chris Gill and Brian Hodgson taking victory away from Trackrod Rally Yorkshire. A strong finish for the pair to take the win, even the close call this morning not slowing them down through the afternoon. Back to Category 3, and for Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie, there was no clawing back that time they'd lost in the ditch. They'd have to settle for 5th place, meaning that the championship that looked so set to be theirs this weekend, had things gone well, would go down to the wire in a final round battle in Carlisle. Richard Jordan and James Grattan-Smith scored their best BHRC result to date with 4th place overall. You can't be disappointed with a result like that, with a leaderboard like this on your home event. Onto the podium positions though, and it will be a battle there for a few of our crews. And for Ben Friend and Cliffy Simmons, it will be 3rd to end the rally. It had been close all day, with times changing hands almost every stage, but this weekend they'd have to settle for that runner-up position. That meant it was Simon Webster and Alan Cook beating them with a neat and tidy run through the afternoon to take that second place that they'd been trying all day to keep. A strong end to the rally for the pair on this penultimate round of the series. But there would be no stopping Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell. A dominant victory, and one that kept the championship open until the next round. It was all down to how Grehan would do in that final showdown. But this pair in that Fiat 131 would be there, and they would be doing all they could to make history on these British Historic Rally Championship stages. A very wet Kielder forest greeted our crews for the final showdown of the Fuchs Lubricants British Historic Rally Championship. The stage was set. The title was going to be decided here, whatever the outcome. With the calculations done, all Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell could do was their very best on the stages and keep their fingers crossed. They needed to win, and to see what happened behind them more crucially. They started the day off doing just that, leading the way after the morning stages and keeping one eye on Grehan just behind. 4th place or higher would net Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie the championship, and the pressure was on. A bit of a moment at the start of the first stage, perhaps showing that it was starting to take its toll. Bit of a scare for them, but they keep it neat and tidy after that to end the morning 2nd, on track for the title if the afternoon went just the same way. Outside of the championship battle, but certainly on for a strong finish after such a great finish last time out, it was 3rd place for Richard Jordan and James Grattan-Smith. Happy with how things were going and on track for their best result too. Adrian Hetherington and Ronan O'Neill, meanwhile, will be back this weekend, and they were going well. A misfire over the morning stages on high revs, not exactly ideal. They need to be looking at that in service, but at least at this stage they were still going. Robert Goff, with Jack Bowen alongside this time, will be suffering with the car steaming up a bit in the wet conditions here in Carlisle. But he got through the stages in one piece, lying in 5th place at the midpoint of the rally. Category 2 on the final round was a smaller affair than usual, but just as competitive, with the main contenders in with a shout at the title here to do battle. And it would be the early lead for Chris Gill and Graham Wild. They just needed a good run to take the title, so they were taking it easy, not taking too many risks, and trying to avoid any mistakes. For Josh Carr and Richard Wardle, it will be 2nd. They were having a good, clean run, leading the way in the C3 class, and they were doing all that they could for now. And 3rd of our title contenders would be Warren Fittiskirk and Gary Green. Cautious in these slippery conditions, but still putting in some strong times to lie in 3rd overall in Cat 2. And after such a good and varied entry in Cat 1 at the last round, sadly Bob Bean and Mike Curry were back on their own in Category 1 once again here at the final round, but doing the business as far as the overall times were concerned in that Cortina once again. On to the afternoon and the last few stages of what had been a pretty exciting and fast-paced championship. It would be a finish for Bob Bean and Mike Curry, rounding out their great and dominant season, as you might have expected, with a strong finish in the class and overall. In Category 2, Warren Finneskirk and Gary Green would be happy with the grip through the afternoon. They did get caught out, though, taking a trip into the ditch, thankfully coming out the other side, which not many can say, to take third place. There was little more, though, that Josh Carr and Richard Wardle could do with an underpowered car. And after a strong drive all season, it would be second place. A good result in the end and a C3 class victory once again. But this would surely give them something to come back and aim to beat next season. But that meant it was victory at the final round and indeed in the title for the category for Chris Skill and Graham Wild. No issues to report. Chris delighted to take victory after such a strong season and after finishing every round. That's not a bad record. The title still to be decided then through these afternoon stages. We're back into Category 3. Phil and Mick Squires didn't find the afternoon as slippery as they had the morning. They were just glad to get through, though, to the end of the rally to take 5th overall. Richard Jordan and James Grattan-Smith would be pushing hard, even taking a trip into one of these infamous ditches in Stage 4, but they did again get out the other side and end the rally with 4th place. The miles slipping away then, we were onto the podium positions, and it would be a good end to the rally for Robert Goff and Jack Bowen, feeling like they were struggling for grip, but clearly they had more than they thought. A strong finish for the pair. A successful return to the championship as well for Adrian Hetherington and Ronan O'Neill. The car all fixed for the afternoon, and the pair taking 2nd place overall this weekend. If this is the first you've seen of the championship so far, well, you'll be wondering what happened next. And what happened to that fight at the top? Indeed, in the championship. Well, unfortunately for Matt Edwards and Hamish Campbell, they wouldn't have been able to do anything more than they were. Although it would all be in vain anyway, the pair not making it out of Stage 4 with mechanical issues on that Fiat 131. So that all meant, after a hard-fought season, Henry Grehan and Daniel Petrie did exactly what they came here to do and took the BHRC title. Their first time getting their names scribed on the trophy and taking the title home to Shropshire after a tough season, battling it out on the stages of the BHRC. Drama right up until the final stop line then in the Fuchs Lubricants British Historic Rally Championship. Congratulations on a well-deserved title for Henry Grehan. Matt Edwards just missing out on the title and on giving the Fiat 131 its first BHRC title as well. But with rally wins overall under their belts, surely they've proven themselves more than capable should they be back for another crack at that title. Congratulations as well to our Category 2 winner Chris Skill and to Category 1 winner Bob Bean. A glorious season for both of those, and to the rest of you who entertained us with such spectacular sideways action on the stages across the various classes and categories this season.